The Dentalpreneur Podcast. Okay, doctor, it's time to put down that handpiece. You're listening to the show dedicated to helping dentists get their lives back. It's time to decrease your stress, increase your profitability, and regain your passion. Now introducing your host, Dr. Mark Costas.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. How you doing, my friends? I hope you're awesome out there today in podcast land. All right, we got a brand new guest to the show today. First time on the show. Got to know him just a little bit in the pre-chat, but I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. Let's welcome to the podcast Dr. Chaz Vittitow. Is that correct, Chaz?
Dr. Chaz Vittitow. Yeah. It's okay.
Chaz Vittitow. Okay. He's better known as Dr. Chaz. He grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. His father, who spent 25 years as a dentist, inspired Chaz to pursue his field after noticing his dedication to patients and community involvement. Today, Dr. Chaz mirrors those qualities by serving those in need and lending his time and services to philanthropic efforts. Dr. Chaz attended Western Kentucky University and then went on to the University of Kentucky College of Dentistry. Shortly after that, he was commissioned as an officer in the U.S. Navy, serving 5 years stationed in San Diego, Sicily, Whidbey Island. Upon returning, he spent a couple of years as an associate dentist and is now proud and excited to own his own dental practice. Dr. Chaz, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks, Mark, for having me. Yeah, excited to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. You know?
That's awesome. Thanks so much for being on here. Yeah, first and foremost, I love your history, and thank you so much for your service. Really, really much appreciated. Tell us about. Let's start there. Tell us about after being influenced by your dad. I have one son who's interested in dentistry out of 3 sons, so I'm really excited that could potentially happen. But what was it specifically about watching your dad as a practicing dentist that got you inspired to join his profession?
Yeah. The funny part is I think he was never, Chaz, you got to go into dentistry. I think he saw, we're similar, but we're also very different. He had a very small practice and was really, really focused on, aesthetics and things like that. I think he saw me as more of a big picture guy, maybe a little more entrepreneurial. So he was never pushing on it. But I think, I just remember small things. We'd be out at some restaurant grabbing lunch and someone would come up to him or to me and be like, "Hey, I just want you to know, like, your dad really helped me out, fixed me up when I really needed it. Super grateful, for him." And I think I just noticed he was always there, I was never like, my dad's got to work, he can't be here on the weekend or this thing, my sport event in the evening. And then I think I just saw, he really enjoyed learning and getting better. So I think that was kind of the initial inspiration with him. And then, I was always kind of inspired by business a little bit. And I think I saw, just small aspects of that. And then he tailored off into some other things for him with some medical equipment sales and other ventures. So I think I saw it as an opportunity, to get into a field where you could continually learn, serve your community, as well as kind of spin off into some other business ventures if you wanted.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your time in dental school and what it was like to be a commissioned officer in the Navy. How was that experience?
Yeah. Well, I went to the University of Kentucky. It was great. I don't really know. The cool thing about joining the Navy afterwards is you get to meet people from all different schools and everything else. I think I had a good experience, made some great friends, and, I was super grateful that the Navy helped me pay for it and everything. And the funny part is, maybe to dial back a little bit, the summer that I applied to dental school was the summer that my dad sold his practice kind of out of the blue.
Oh, really?
So I always thought, I'll go work with my dad. That'd be cool. Mm-hmm. But he sold his practice to his partner at the time. And he was pretty young. He was like 52, and so that was what kind of made me say, okay, well, I think I've always thought about joining the military. That'd be a cool way to go about it. And then the military was a great experience. You learn a lot about leadership, both good and bad. You learn a lot about, different styles of dentistry from people that you meet. And, At one point I kind of thought about my 5 closest friends, and it was like, oh, I got one from Florida, one from Colorado, one from Pennsylvania, just meeting people from all over the world. And then, yeah, I mean, you mentioned the 3 places I was stationed. I'd never lived outside of the state of Kentucky. And then before you know it, we're living in Europe, and it's like, wow, this is super cool.
Yeah.
So it just gives you a good worldview, and you get to work around a lot of specialists. And I think unless you're, depending on what people's motivation are, I would always say, like, yeah, you should look into the military option if you're going through dental school, because, as all of us know that have been out in practice for a while, it feels like a ton to think about committing 4 or 5 years of your life after dental school, but then it just flies by, and then you come out with some really great leadership and clinical experience. So it was great. Loved it everywhere we lived. I got 4 kids born in 4 different places. It was cool. So
that's awesome. That is awesome. So when was it that you decided that practice ownership was going to be your route versus just associating? Because there's not a whole lot of entrepreneurial stuff happening when you're in the military, typically, especially when you're serving time overseas and stuff. It's not like you're sitting there, around a bunch of mentors that have their own private practice, et cetera. So when did that kind of come as a realization that that's the direction you wanted to go?
Yeah, I mean, when you sign up to be, like, when you're a dentist in the military, you kind of, I think a lot of people go into it thinking like, oh, okay, I'm going to kind of use this as a launch pad, do my time. Almost sounds like you're in prison or something, but do your time, kind of get out and then launch into your next thing. But then you get into it, and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, well, I really like who I'm working with. I like what I'm doing, and I'm already 3 years in. Maybe I'll just take it to 10. And then there's always kind of this magic number of, like, once you hit 20 years, then you're you're drawing a pension, you're getting all these benefits and everything. So, But for me, I think the realization came when I was stationed overseas. I was having a great experience. I loved living where we lived. But I listened to a lot of, I listened to your podcast. I listened to, shared practices, lifestyle practice. I mean, all these things. And it was like, wow. The one thing I would say was, when I was in the Navy, you don't have a lot of control. You have no control over who you work with, who you work for, even the materials and the procedures and things you're doing. And I think that I was just willing to take the risk of, like, I wanted to kind of chart my own path and go for it and try. And if I, hit a bump along the road, at least it was like the path that I chose. And so I think that probably the way I really soaked up a lot of the mentorship was, I wasn't around people physically that were doing it, but I could absorb content and read books and that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally.
While I had some time when I was serving.
That's cool. And have you always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit? Did you see kind of the way that your dad's lifestyle was and say, I want it to be that way?
I think so. I mean, I'm always really curious, about, people, like, what motivates you, like, what motivates Mark Costas to go out and do what he does, right? Where did it start? What is it that continues to push you? I think that for me, there was a level of, inspiration from my dad, for sure. And I'm grateful for that. I was never like, when you go back and as a kid be like, oh yeah, well, I started my paper route and I had all these business ventures. I just really liked being on a team. I liked, leading and that sort of thing. So whether it was sports, I helped start a chapter of a fraternity in college. And then, I just always liked being involved and being around people. And I felt energized by that, So I think that was probably the entrepreneurial part of me. And then I think I always enjoyed being coached. And so then when you realize, like, oh, wow, you can get coached on business and, leadership and you can get significantly improve in that. And I think I just like growth, I like exercise, I like knowledge, leadership, all those things. And so I think that was what really inspired the entrepreneurial spirit in me, was just the opportunity for growth. Not that I was just like ingrained in me since I was a kid,
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, that's awesome. So this next question is kind of two-pronged, I guess. We can go 2 different directions with it, but you do have a successful YouTube kind of channel where you talk about certain things, as far as practice ownership, et cetera. I would love to hear kind of more about your own practice, the model of that practice, and some of the things that you teach on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Well, in short, yeah, I mean, I was in the military for 5 years, learned a lot. I was associate for 2. It was a great experience. It was pretty high volume, PPO driven practice, but just learned a lot of good surgical skills, talking to patients, those sorts of things. It's totally different, because you're talking financials and everything. Whereas in the Navy, you're just like, hey, do this because you should,
Yeah.
So,
and just time out really quick. When you were in
yeah.
the military, what types of procedures were you doing? Because I've talked to people in the military that are just like, I was just drill and fill, and I could make a beautiful crown out of amalgam. And then I've talked to other people where they're like, yeah, man, I was placing implants, and I was doing Whidbeys, and it was a really great experience. So where in that kind of range were you?
Yeah, well, that's the hard part. I mean, you don't know, because you might, if you go to a clinic where there's so my first year in San Diego, I was in an AEGD, and all the specialists were super cool, right? So the prosthodontists were like, let's dive into this thing. Let's do this case. Let's do multi-units and everything else. And then the periodontist was kind of like, hey, if you want to place, these single unit implants. And, so there was a really good first year. When I was overseas, there was a lot of it was very family practice style, so you're seeing kids of dependents of active duty, and, there's not a ton of specialists at the clinic I was at. So if you wanted to do a root canal, it's kind of like, well, I mean, you're all by yourself, but you can do it, if you're credentialed, and there's no specialists here to help you. And then my last duty station, it was very kind of more like maybe the first thing you're talking about, where they're like, hey, general dentists, you can just stay in their lane, do this thing. And I think that's probably the point where I was like, oh, okay, I was already pretty sure I was getting out, but now I realized that, I don't want to play this crapshoot of like where you get stationed and the leadership that's there, and the kind of how they're going to pigeonhole you,
Totally.
So it can be very different depending on who you work with and where you work. But mine was overall, of the 5 years, I would say 4 of them were really good as far as, we were doing a lot of different procedures, but I wasn't coming out of the military like, oh, I can place any implant and take out any tooth and, do full mouth reconstructions. I mean, I had to take more CE and get more training, and things like I studied at the Coyce Center once I moved out to Washington, and I was kind of getting more, I was investing in myself even more, but I had really good fundamentals, I would say.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what have you integrated as far as your interests and some of the things that you were unable to do in the military into your own current practice model now?
Yeah. So I would say, probably still the majority of it is restorative. I mean, crown and bridge, fillings, things like that. But I think that in having my own practice, and, obviously this is kind of state by state, but here in Washington, we have expanded function dental assistants, we have restorative hygiene. So I've really tried to have this model in my practice of like kind of who, not how, if someone else can do it, that it's not required by the doctor, then if at all possible, we want them to do it. So if it's numbing, the hygienist can do it. If it's fillings, the hygienist can do it. So we've utilized that quite a bit. And then the other things are just, some of the cool stuff like, PRF and surgery. I studied a lot through the Spencer Study Club and the Academy of Dental Sleep Medicine. So we do some cool TMJ and sleep things. And I've kind of given up on, I've kind of outsourced, endo and peds and things like that. So that's one of the things that, when you're first out of school and I was in the Navy, I was like, I got to be able to do everything perfectly,
Yeah.
I think that you talk to any seasoned dentist and they're like, no, you should probably pick like a few and be like world-class at it. And I wouldn't have heard that. I couldn't accept that. When I was first out of school, someone listening to this might say, no, I need to like know how to do everything. I'm just like, that's fine. But there's going to come a time where you're going to be way more effective and efficient if you can pick a few and be like awesome at it. And I promise you, there are enough patients out there that need whatever you decide on, so.
Are you single provider? Operator?
I just recently brought on an associate. So I started my practice 3.5 years ago.
How many
and
ops?
I had one short season of an associate, but I just recently brought on someone who's, been a much better fit. And
good.
So even with that, it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm going to outsource even more. Or this person can kind of do this and pick up the slack for me. And so that's been that's been cool.
How many operatories do you have? What's the square footage in operatories?
I got 7 operatories.
Awesome.
We're about 3,300 square feet.
Nice.
So I started it, and I, kind of the classic startup story. I mean, I built it for 7. I had 2 chairs off the bat, and then we kind of went to 2 to 3 pretty quick, and then 3 to 5, and then 5 to 7, kind of at different increments. It was a great way to do it. I mean, I think more and more people should consider startups if they can. It just depends on the market and the opportunity, but it was to me a way more effective way to grow into the practice that I really wanted to be in, as opposed to trying to like jimmy it into some practice that I purchased. But
for sure,
each his own.
So how was that? I mean, was it the right demographic? Did you pick the demographic based on kind of where you thought a startup would be successful, or did you find the demographic and then say, I'm going to do this startup whether or not the demographics are favorable?
Yeah. I mean, it's so hard to know. I just think it's so important to love where you live. I mean, I know that it's like, there's so many motivating factors. I mean, I didn't have the student loans, but I did have 4 kids, and, I had a lot of, other motivating things, but I worked with Ideal Practices. So at the time when I joined, it was Jamie Amos, and then Stephen Treader took over. And so I had some coaching with them. And so, the way that kind of works is you kind of pick your area, and they kind of coach you on like, well, let's run a demographics report. Let's see. And so the demographics were actually pretty bad. It was like 1 to 1,000, dentist to population ratio. And they were like, hey, this isn't great. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean? Are you telling me I can't open here? And then the funny thing was, they said, all of our most successful startups are in saturated areas, because they know they have to level up, as well as you don't really think about it. But that 1 to 1,000, the competition may be really weak. It may be like they have no website, they've got no brand, they have no patient experience. They might not even be taking new patients. And then the other part of it was Bellingham was growing quite a bit. And so it felt like it was right for a good place to start.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, now I want to talk about, you and I got connected through Glidewell. I have I've been doing some speaking at Glidewell, and they were so gracious. They allowed us to have one of our mastermind meetings there. So we had a couple hundred people at their Glidewell facility in Irvine there. What a gorgeous facility.
That place is amazing.
Holy mackerel. Wow. Anyway, yeah, we packed the house there in their little learning center, and it was really, really cool. They took us on, a tour of the thing, a guided tour. You have the little headphones in, and they're telling you all about like Jim Glidewell started in his garage waxing up, single crowns, and now they're in 1 million square feet in the most expensive real estate in the country, basically.
Yeah,
and he owns all the buildings and all the land. Really, really, really cool story, but that we got connected that way. So they have kind of an LMS where they release a bunch of content to their Glidewell customers, and I'm on there and you're on there. I'd love to hear just more about why you got into content, what it is you talk about on your YouTube channel, because it's not for the faint of heart, man. You're putting out stuff. I remember I started my podcast in 2015 with a little bit of YouTube stuff. And so that 11 years and 7 months or something, I haven't missed a day since, 5 days a week, every single day since we started June 10th of 2015. But in the beginning, man, it was like I was just talking to my mom and dad and a couple of my dental school friends, and I would have like per episode, I would have like 25 listens, and that was me probably padding it myself by listening to it like 3 times, or at least playing it in the background so I'd get more downloads. But it's thankless in the beginning. So what motivated you to do it, and what do you like to talk about on your channel?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mark, for sharing a little bit of your story. I mean, it's all pretty new for me. It's called the Dental Jumpstart. And I think what motivated me was, I mean, I just talked to so many dentists, even just like my peers and colleagues, and they feel stuck, right? They're like, oh man, dental insurance write-offs are eating up everything. The overhead's going up. It's not like it used to be. I'm just going to kind of stay here in this job that I don't like. And I just think, I was talking to you on the pre-chat, but I just feel like there's more opportunity now than ever, and so I just, again, like I said, I love growth. I love motivation, getting motivated and inspiring. And I felt so inspired by so many, I mean, yourself included, and people that put out content on their channel. And so I think it kind of started off, I just want to kind of tell my story, right, of what I've learned as a military officer, as an associate, as a startup doctor. And then the big things that we talk about now are just really leveraging relationships. There's so many people out there who want to help you. Not that it's always for free, right? But there's wonderful people out there. Glidewell has certainly been that for me. Not just on the equipment side, but just on learning customer service and, being responsive, and just if anyone that works with them knows like their service is just amazing. And so on my channel, we talk a lot about leadership of your team. We talk a lot about making intentional decisions for your practice, dropping procedures that really don't bring you life or you don't feel like you're really great at, leveling up on the ones that you do. We talk a lot about dropping insurance networks. Everyone obviously has their own model, but I just think more and more doctors would love to do that, and they're afraid to, and they don't know the steps to do it. Mm-hmm. So a bit of my story, I started off, my practice, we were a network with about 7 insurance companies.
Okay.
2 years in, we were completely out of network. And we continue to grow and, get 40 to 50 new patients